There is a liquid that costs exactly $2 to make at home. It turns gray, cracked, sun-destroyed wood back to the day it left the factory. Not with paint that hides the damage and not with stain that fades in 6 months. It penetrates the grain itself and rebuilds the wood from the inside out. One coat on a rotting fence and the neighbors think you replaced every board. One pass on a weathered deck and the contractor you almost called loses a $1,000 job. Furniture that looked ready for the landfill suddenly looks like it belongs in a showroom. No sanding required. No power tools needed. No experience necessary. This formula has existed since before the Second World War, when craftsmen in the 1930s knew it by heart. Cabinet makers passed it down like a family secret. Then the wood restoration industry figured out something devastating. If homeowners discovered this liquid, they would never call a contractor again. A $2 bottle that replaces a $900 service cannot be allowed to spread. So they buried it. Not because it failed, but because it worked too well. This is the story of the liquid the wood industry prayed you would never find. Welcome to the truth they buried. Now let me take you back to where this formula was born. In 1860, a British inventor named Frederick Walton noticed something strange in his London workshop. A skin had formed on the surface of a can of linseed oil he had left open overnight. That rubbery film was harder than varnish and more flexible than lacquer. Walton realized the oil was reacting with oxygen in the air and forming a natural polymer. He spent the next 3 years perfecting the process. By 1863, he had invented linoleum, the first mass-produced floor covering in history built entirely on one ingredient, which was linseed oil extracted from the seeds of the flax plant. But the story of this oil goes back much further than Victorian England. Try 20,000 years further. The flax plant is one of the oldest cultivated crops on Earth, grown in ancient Mesopotamia for both fiber and seed. Egyptian tombs contain linen cloth woven from flax that is still intact after 4,000 years. And in ancient China, woodworkers discovered that pressing those seeds produced a golden oil that soaked into timber and hardened over weeks into a protective shield. This was the first wood finish ever recorded in human history. Not polyurethane from a factory. Not chemical sealant from a laboratory. Oil from a seed pressed by hand and rubbed into wood with a cloth. For centuries across Europe, every cabinet maker, shipbuilder, and furniture maker used linseed oil as the foundation of their craft. Medieval builders mixed it with lead oxide to create boiled linseed oil, which dried harder and faster than the raw form. Cathedral doors in Germany treated with this oil in the 1500s are still standing today. British naval vessels coated their decks with linseed oil before crossing the Atlantic, and the wood survived saltwater, tropical sun, and cannon fire. And then something happened that changed everything. In the 1950s, the petrochemical industry introduced synthetic resins, polyurethane lacquer, and chemical varnishes. These products flooded the market. They were faster to apply, shinier to look at, and far more profitable to manufacture. Linseed oil cost pennies per gallon to produce, while synthetic finishes cost dollars and required reapplication every 2 to 3 years. The industry did not switch because the new products were better. They switched because the new products generated repeat revenue, and the old formula quietly disappeared from hardware store shelves. Why is this formula not sold in every hardware store in America? And why does every contractor pretend it does not exist? Because the wood restoration industry generates nearly $2 billion per year in product sales alone. The broader home restoration market in the United States hit $210 billion in annual revenue. $210 billion. That is the size of the machine that profits from your ignorance about 3 ingredients you can buy for pocket change. Deck refinishing alone costs homeowners an average of $900 to $2,700 per project. And the industry recommends you refinish every 2 to 3 years. That is $1,000 every 3 years for a single deck. Over 20 years of home ownership, that is nearly $7,000 spent on one wooden platform behind your house. A platform you could maintain yourself for under $10 total using a formula that predates the invention of television. Now multiply that by the 75 million single-family homes in America that have wooden decks, fences, porches, pergolas, furniture, floors, cabinets, trim window frames, and doors. The amount of money flowing from homeowners to contractors and chemical companies for basic wood maintenance is staggering. And it all depends on one thing: keeping you convinced that you cannot do this yourself. But here is the mechanism that keeps this buried. You cannot patent linseed oil because it is a natural product that has existed for thousands of years. You cannot patent vinegar because it is acetic acid, one of the oldest chemicals known to humanity. You cannot patent turpentine because it has been distilled from pine trees since the ancient Greeks. There is no proprietary molecule. New trade secret. No intellectual property to protect. And what cannot be patented cannot generate licensing fees. What cannot be licensed cannot create exclusive distribution. And what cannot be distributed exclusively cannot build a brand monopoly. The entire business model of the wood restoration industry depends on you believing that wood care requires specialized, branded, expensive products with names you recognize from television commercials. Products that contain the exact same active ingredients that cost pennies at the hardware store repackaged with a label and a 400% markup. Here is what happens at the molecular level when you apply this liquid to damaged wood. Linseed oil is a triglyceride with an unusually high concentration of alpha-linolenic acid. That is a polyunsaturated fatty acid that reacts with oxygen through a process scientists call autoxidation. When you rub the oil into wood, it does not sit on the surface like paint or varnish. It penetrates deep into the cellular structure of the timber itself. Once inside, the fatty acid chains begin to cross-link with each other, forming a flexible polymer network that fills every pore. The cross-linking process creates a new material inside the wood fibers. A natural resin that expands and contracts with temperature but repels moisture and resists scratching. Studies confirm that linseed oil penetrates wood up to 4 times deeper than synthetic polyurethane. Polyurethane sits on top of the grain like a plastic shell, and one crack in that shell lets moisture rush underneath. That is why polyurethane decks peel, blister, and turn gray within 3 seasons. Linseed oil does the opposite because it becomes part of the wood itself. Now add white vinegar to the mixture and something remarkable happens. Vinegar is acetic acid, a natural solvent that cuts through decades of grime oxidation and dead finish without damaging healthy fibers underneath. While the vinegar strips away the gray, the linseed oil floods into the freshly exposed grain and begins polymerizing immediately. The third ingredient is the key that unlocks the entire formula. Turpentine. A natural solvent distilled from pine resin thins the linseed oil so it penetrates twice as deep and cures twice as fast. Without turpentine, the oil pools on the surface and takes weeks to harden. With turpentine, it soaks in within minutes and begins hardening within hours. The total cost of these 3 ingredients at any hardware store is less than $2 per application. A quart of boiled linseed oil costs about $4. A gallon of white vinegar costs under $3. And a small can of turpentine runs about $5 and lasts for months. Compare that to what a contractor charges for the same result. The markup is not on skill. The markup is on your ignorance. I need to be honest with you about something because this formula is not magic and there are limitations you should understand. Raw linseed oil without metallic drying agents can take weeks to fully cure in humid environments, which is why the recipe specifically calls for boiled linseed oil that contains drying catalysts to accelerate hardening to 24 to 48 hours. And there is one critical safety warning that most do-it-yourself channels completely ignore. Rags soaked with linseed oil can spontaneously combust if left crumpled in a pile. In 1991, a fire caused by linseed oil-soaked rags destroyed one Meridian Plaza in Philadelphia and killed 3 firefighters. The oxidation process generates heat. If the rag is folded, that heat cannot escape and it will catch fire. You must always spread your rags flat to dry outdoors or submerge them in water in a sealed metal container before disposing of them. Because this is not optional, this is a life safety rule. Here is exactly how to make and apply this liquid. Step 1. Gather your 3 ingredients from any hardware store. 1 part boiled linseed oil where the can must say boiled on the label. 1 part white distilled vinegar. And 1 part turpentine, also called gum spirits, found in the paint aisle. Step 2. Combine equal parts of all 3 into a glass jar with a tight lid and shake vigorously for 30 seconds until the mixture emulsifies into a cloudy, golden liquid. Step 3. Clean the wood surface with a dry brush to remove loose dirt, cobwebs, and debris because you do not need to sand, strip, or power wash. Step 4. Dip a clean cotton rag into the mixture and apply it along the grain of the wood using firm, even strokes. Work in sections about 2 feet wide so the liquid does not dry before you spread it. Step 5. Let the first coat absorb for 10 to 15 minutes, then wipe away any excess with a dry cloth. Step 6. Wait 24 hours and apply a second coat using the same method. Because the second coat deepens the color and doubles the protective barrier inside the wood fibers. For a weathered deck, start with the most damaged board so you can see the transformation immediately. The gray oxidized layer will dissolve on contact with the vinegar, and the golden oil will flood into the exposed grain within seconds. The before and after on a single board will convince you faster than anything I can say, and within 10 minutes you will be doing every board because the result is that dramatic. For indoor furniture, apply with a softer cloth using lighter pressure and small circular motions. Antique pieces respond especially well because the oil rehydrates wood that has been drying out for decades, bringing dining tables, dressers, bookshelves, and nightstands back to life with one application. For fences, use a wider brush or paint roller to cover large areas quickly because a fence that looked like it needed replacing will look brand new by sunset. One batch in a quart jar covers approximately 30 to 40 square feet of surface area. For hardwood floors, apply in thin even coats with a flat mop pad, working one section at a time and allowing 24 hours between coats. The floor will develop a warm satin sheen that deepens with each application. The same technique Victorian homeowners used to maintain their oak and walnut floors for generations. A contractor would charge you $600 or more for that same coverage area on a single deck. A floor refinishing company would quote $3 to $7 per square foot, turning a 200 square foot room into a $1,400 invoice. You just did it for less than $2 in materials and 20 minutes of your time with no appointment, no 2-week wait, and no strangers tracking dust through your house. And the finish lasts because linseed oil does not sit on the surface waiting to chip. It lives inside the wood and renews with each reapplication. A maintenance coat once a year takes 5 minutes per piece of furniture and keeps the grain hydrated and protected for decades. Compare that to the contractor who wants to see you every 2 to 3 years at $1,000 per visit. This knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it worked so well that an entire industry had to pretend it never existed. For 20,000 years, humans protected wood with oil from a seed and acid from fermented grain. No corporation. No brand name. No expensive equipment. Just chemistry that nature perfected long before any patent office opened its doors. Your grandparents knew this formula. It was written on index cards and tucked inside kitchen drawers. And then one generation stopped passing it down because a television commercial told them there was a better way. There was not a better way. There was just a more expensive way. The $2 billion wood restoration industry prays every single day that you never learn what you just learned. But now you know. And the formula is not complicated enough to forget. 3 ingredients. Equal parts. 1 jar. 1 rag. 20 minutes. That gray deck you have been avoiding all summer could look brand new by this weekend for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. The wood did not die. It was just waiting for someone to remember what the industry made us forget. If this truth saved you from a $1,000 mistake, hit the subscribe button and share this video with a homeowner who needs to see it. Every share preserves what they tried to erase.